The indication that your SSL certificate has expired is a URL box that looks like this. This video deals with two issues. First issue is, how do I obtain a new SSL certificate? The second issue is, after I obtain this SSL certificate, where do I put it in the file system of the server? There is something which needs to be clearly understood about an SSL certificate. When you are deciding on what the name should be on the certificate, and here I'm talking about the domain name, you have to know that the domain name has to be the same as the domain name of the physical server on which you are installing the certificate. So if I'm installing the certificate on a machine called sam.buscompanyx.com, I can only install certificates with the domain buscompanyx.com because that's the same domain name as the domain name used by the machine for the machine. The reason that I bring this up is that I was hosting a website called underdog.zone on a machine called sam.buscompanyx.com. I tried to have both the underdog.zone domain name and the buscompanyx.com domain name. Both of them, I tried to put them on the SSL certificate, and I found out that that is wrong. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some details about where to put the actual certificate file. The certificate file will be placed in a directory called Ssl-certs in the Apache 2 configuration directory. Okay, so that's where the certificate file will go. Now, as far as the configuration files for Apache, as you may know, on Ubuntu, you can have multiple virtual host configuration file. However, for Apache, you are only allowed to have one of those virtual host configuration files enabled. I mean, you can have a lot of them, but you can only have certain ones enabled. Okay, so you can only have one enabled that designates that virtual host as an SSL HTTPS host. So you can't host more than one, in other words, multiple websites on the same web server having HTTPS, or in other words, an SSL certificate. Another way of putting it, only one of those enabled virtual host files can have an SSL certificate directive. There's an Apache module called mod.ssl. The file is called mod_ssl.c. That module for Apache has to be enabled. If you're changing SSL certificates and the new certificate has a different file name, then you'll need to update your SSL directives in the virtual host file for the SSL virtual host. And obviously, after making all these changes, you're going to have to do a restart of Apache using this command, service apache 2 restart. When you receive or when you generate, because there's going to be multiple SSL files, it's not just one file. I think there may be one that you have to generate, and then there's one that the certificate authority or your web host or whoever is going to have to generate. It's good to have copies of those somewhere in addition to having a copy on the web server itself, because the web server could crash and maybe the hard drive could be unrecoverable. So you want to have a copy somewhere else. There's one simple way to put the contents of these certificates on the server, and that's to use the nano editor and cut and paste. After you have everything set up and ready, you're going to want to go to one of the websites that checks the certificate for your website. By the way, if I want to find out more information about SSL certificates, the very original material, I believe, was mostly in the No Framework PHP Endeavor playlist. The virtual host configuration files are in a directory called Sites Available, and that's for Apache on Ubuntu. You may need to go there and check the virtual host file for your SSL website to make sure everything over there is correct. The actual steps for generating the SSL certificate can vary from year to year, so you need to work with your provider, for example, Liquid Web, so that both they and you are on the same page on what needs to be done in terms of generating the certificate. By the way, Liquid Web charges me $80 for this whole process. The Unix command that I have to issue in order to, I think, make the private key or the first file is called the Csr Generation Process. The Liquid Web Manage interface has something called an Ssl Certificate Dashboard. And there's a little trick here where I asked them for the www.buscompanyx.com, and then I ended up with this one, which I asked for, and this one without the W's. If I had asked for the one without the W's, then they would not have given me the one with the W's unless I paid extra money. So that's a little tip there. The way to get to that page that we just observed is to click on Overview, and then you will see your hosting infrastructure, and you will have your servers and your services listed. This over here is the command that I used for the Csr Generation Process. Here is the actual command that I used, and I generated the CSR based on my old or previous private key, which is this one. This page also shows the questions that this Unix utility that I used for generating the CSR, the questions that it asked me and how I answered them. Here's a screenshot of the website that I used to check the certificate to see if everything was okay. And this one actually shows that there was something wrong. Here's a clear shot of the URL. This showed that there was a problem with the intermediate certificate. This is the file that had the problem with it. It's called the CA bundle. The problem was that that file has multiple certificates in it. They're basically different types or different protocols. The one with the SHA-1 protocol, we had to remove that one because that one was causing the problem. SHA-1 type protocol or certificates are deprecated. They're not used anymore. That's why there was an error. Each one of the files that you see here has its own purpose. This one, the public key, that one was generated by us when we generated the private key using the Csr Generation Process. The reason you see the date 2014, even though the year that I used these keys was not 2014, 2016, is that the name of the file comes from the name of the private key, and that was generated in 2014. As you may recall, I reused the private key. And again, this page over here is a good resource for generating SSL keys using a Unix command. I used this particular command, but some other day I may need to use a different command. The csr.csr file, that's the file that I gave to Liquid Web. And they returned to me two files. This one, Liquid Web 2016.crt and CA Bundle 2016.crt. I have to make sure that they give me that CA bundle because they're guaranteed to give me this one, but sometimes they forget to give me this one. That's it for this video.